They put this thing on her and they start telling her to hop around. And she's now hopping on command.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this witch catcher thing. So it's lore stuff.
Lore.
So as far as I know, the witch catcher is made up, but it does resemble some medieval torture devices, like the collar, which had spikes all around it going into your neck, so you couldn't lie down or eat, and eventually, you confess after that. It also resembles the instrument used in medieval times to punish those who needed to learn to hold their tongue. The scold's bridle, also called a witch's bridle, a gossip's bridle, a Branks bridle, or just the Branks. It's unclear where the term Branks comes from. It may be some lost phrase or maybe from the French word barnacle. So much of the source material is coming from Professor Linda E. Boos's, I'm going to call your name Boos, I'm sorry that's not it, Scolding Brides and Bridling Scolds, Taming the Woman's Unruly Member. And she's a Shakespearean author. It was about taming of the shrew. But that is a great title.
Woo! Yeah.
So additional sources will be in the show notes per usual. So in general, the scold bridle could be described as an iron muzzle consisting of an iron frame or mask that enclosed the head, sometimes with the addition of a mask to cover the face. The bridle bit was a metal piece that extended into the mouth, preventing the wearer from speaking. And the design often included a lead so you could parade the wearer around. All right, so first off, what is a scold, right? It's not a word that we use often these days. So Booth cites a 1675 legal summary. A scold in a legal sense is a troublesome and angry woman who by her brawling and wrangling against her neighbors doth break the public peace and beget, cherish, and increase public discord. And for this she is to be presented and punished in elite by being put to the cucking or the ducking stool, or tumbrel, an engine appointed for that purpose, which is in the fashion of a chair. And herein she is to sit and to be let down in the water overhead and ears 3 or 4 times, so that no part of her be above the water, diving or ducking down, though against her will, as ducks do under the water. So overall, a scold is a gossip, a shrew, a nag, a woman who dominates her husband, or 1,000 other terms used to describe an uppity woman.
Drama.
Yes. Women who were accused of being scolds were often the poor, the outcasts, widows, and other vulnerable people without a family for protection. And so there is a lot of parallels between the women who were accused of being scolds as the ones who were being accused as witches. And sometimes they happened at the same time. In medieval England during the 1500s and 1600s, there was a widespread social anxiety that unruly women were going to ruin society, and they had to be punished to prevent them from becoming a plague and ruining all the other women. So in order to punish someone daring to break the public peace like this, they could, like as they said in the legal summary, they could be set on cucking or ducking stools, which, okay, some of the drawings of them kind of look like fun rides because they're just like you sit on these things and they fly you out in the water and then they like duck you down. I was like, woo! So, but
you're probably under duress, so it wasn't.
You're not really.
It wasn't the water feature roller coaster that you think it is today.
No, I'm just like, it's so hot. Can you dunk me again? They could also be made to wear a shame mask. Like you could get creative though. So some places had them represent what you were doing, right? So if you were nosy, the mask could have a long nose. If you were a gossip, it could have a long tongue. Some of them liked animal things. So if you were lazy, then the mask could look like a cow. If you were an eavesdropper, it could be a rabbit and have big ears. I mean, there's also still all the other parts that are like shoving things like metal spikes into you and things, but you could look like a cow.
Yeah, it's like a craft project.
Yeah, of metal that's used to torture somebody, but it's fun, right? So
totally.
So some of them could be like that. There's this pig one that looks like it's fucking bitching, and I was like, I don't kind of want to own one of these, but I don't. But I'm like, oh, these are evil. And also, I will say these things obviously in modern times get taken over for BDSM fun times. Like people use, of course, because it's whatever. People do whatever. So,
Correct.
all right. So the following for this, we're going to go into kind of a detail of these. And this comes from the Victorian gentleman, Mr. T.N. Brushfield, a member of the Chester Archaeological Society in the county of Chester, and a medical superintendent of the Cheshire Lunatic Asylum, who presented a 2-part paper on obsolete punishments with particular reference to those of Cheshire, focusing on the bodily punishments given to women in the 16th and 17th century English villages. And this was published in 1868. So this dude, like the Victorian dudes also really get into studying things that were used to torture women.
Yeah.
So he describes some as contrived with hinged joints as to admit of being readily adapted to the head. It was generally supplied with several connecting staples, so the suit heads of different sizes, and then was secured by a padlock. Affixed to the inner portion of the hoop was a piece of metal, which, when the instrument was properly fitted, pressed the tongue down and effectively branked or bridled it. The length of the mouthpiece or the gag varied from 1.5 to 3 inches. It would also create symptoms of sickness, more especially if the wearer got unruly. And it really reminds me of, I had this mouth appliance that was supposed to bring my jaw forward when I was a kid. And because when I swallow, I thrust my tongue forward.
Oh.
They put these 2 metal prongs on it to discourage me from thrusting my tongue forward. And I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to take the pain, and I'm just like shove my tongue into the prong. Anyways, so the form of the gag was very diversified. The most simple being a mere flat piece of iron. In some, the extremity was turned upwards and others downwards. On many of the specimens, both surfaces were covered with rasp-like elevations. The instrument was generally painted and sometimes in different colors. And the gag, though, was frequently red. The bridle used in the Manchester market to, quote, control the energetic tongues of some of the female stall keepers had alternating red and white cotton bands. So they made it look, that is the color of Manchester United, by the way. Like if you... So like, what the fuck, Manchester? And in towns around Cheshire, England, where this horny dude was, the bridle was passed from one city administration to the next. So each time there was like a new administration coming in, they're like, here's your bridle and your mace. Like they would like, and they would go to the town jailer, right? And then in the houses, there was a hook that was fixed to the side of the stove area. So the husband could send for the jailer, and the jailer would bring the bridle, and then he would chain his wife up until she shut the fuck up. Yep. So the exact timings when they started and when they ended is a bit hard to trace, as first of all, the use was never really sanctioned because it's fucking tortured. So it wasn't always entered into court documents when it was used. Also, it was used against women. So things against women are always recorded. And just, sometimes people just put a bridle on Peggy and just didn't write it down. The use of the bridle in England, though, is thought to align with the arrival of witch hunter asshole King James I, James VI of Scotland, who was known for his harsh punishments of women. And the use of the bridle was heavily documented in Scotland during his reign. In 1567, that was the first recorded use of it in Scotland. Yeah. But by the end of the 1500s, they were said to be in every sizable town. There is a court record of it being used to punish 2 quarreling women in Glasgow in 1574. And these following examples come from the Museum of Witchcraft and Magic, UK. All right. In 1600s, the Branks is mentioned in Stirling as punishment for a shrew. In 1655, Quaker women in Carlisle were led through the street with each an iron instrument of torture called a bridle to prevent their speaking the truth to the people. Having been so exposed to the scorn and derision of the rabble, they were turned out of the city. In 1699, Cecily Pusel, a notorious scold in the workhouse, had to wear the Branks in the street for a half an hour. In 1741, Elizabeth, wife of George Holborn in Northumberland, was tied to the market cross for 2 hours for scandalous and appropriate language to several people. In 1789, that was used in Litchfield, a local farmer enclosed a woman's head to silence her clamorous tongue and led her round a field while boys and girls hooted at her. Nobody pitied her because she was very much disliked by her neighbors.
Sorry.
I know. It's so hard not to laugh at, like, we're like literally talking about the torture women, but sometimes, yeah. So they also gave these
Not
examples.
all women are good women.
Sometimes you're like, well, so they did give the following examples where it was associated with witchcraft accusations. So in 1590, the accused Agnes Sampson, who was examined by King James himself, was fastened to the wall of her cell by a witch's bridle. And that one was described as an iron instrument with 4 sharp prongs forced into the mouth so that the 2 prongs pressed against the tongue and the other 2 against the cheeks. She was kept without sleep, thrown with a rope around her head, and only after these ordeals did she confess to the 53 indictments against her, and then she was strangled and burned as a witch. In 1661, there is the bridle with the wretched victims of superstition were led to execution in Forfar in Scotland. In 1676 in West Yorkshire, there is a reference to one that was made of iron with a gag to fit in the mouth, and the records were also indicated that they could equip this one with a spiked collar to use that on the witches, because you can't just have the gag for the witches, you also have to have the spikes, which is similar to what we're going to have today, right? And so shame, to increase the shame, because these are shame masks, right? The woman, she was paraded around town and it was like festive because there was also nothing to do in medieval town. So it's like, it's time to shame Peggy. And so there is a yeah, you little bastards. So there is a 1653 account of the bridling. I don't like that's a verb, but the bridling of Anne Biddlestone. She was driven through the streets by an officer of the same corporation, so a police officer of Newcastle, holding a rope in his hand, the other end fastened to an engine called the Branks, which is like a crown, it being of iron, which was muzzled over the head and face with a great gap or tongue of iron forced into her mouth, which forced the blood out. Also, to draw more attention, sometimes they would put bells on the top or like make it so there was like whistling sounds that were coming through as she'd be like walking through, which is like, that's really creepy. It was like a woman like with an iron mask whistling coming towards you. Go, thank you, sir. Yeah. And so these were mainly in England and Scotland, but they did spread through Europe. In Germany, that one had a really good pig one. That was known as the Schandmaske. And it also came into through the colonies along with the dunking schools. Like there's reference to one in Toni Morrison's Beloved. So it was used on slaves in America too. So eventually, though, thankfully, it does fade out of popularity as the Victorians moved on to more modern forms of punishment. Because they were like, those masks are barbaric. No shit, motherfucker. Like, of course that mask is barbaric. Yes. Like, what the fuck do you think?
Yes, so, absolutely.
Yeah. So
wild.
Yep. Bridal mask.
Fun.
Fun. Who would have thought honestly, like, and you'll send you that some of them are kind of cool looking, and I feel bad being like, oh no, why did you have to be creative?
Right.
And you know somebody really enjoyed making that pig mask.
Oh, clearly.